All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for today's Real Talk session. Today, I very much would like to start by telling you that we have a couple of housekeeping items to go through. One is that we are recording this session. You will get the recorded session within 24 to 48 hours. And also check out our resources area that you see within your On24 panel here. There are data sheets, lots of great links and different resources for you. Also want to encourage you to engage with us during this presentation. We will try to get to all of your questions and be taking your questions towards the end of our presentation. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Melanie Marks. I am the Director of Industry Marketing here at Snowflake, and I am your moderator for today's presentation. I'd also like to welcome Chris Boulanger. He is the co-founder and managing director of Cervelo. And Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Melanie. Allow me to spend a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds really just introducing Cervelo and our relationship with Snowflake. Cervelo is a data and analytics company that was started in 2009 and headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. We currently have offices in New York, Dallas, London, and Bangalore, India. We have been working with Snowflake for the past couple of years. One of our main objectives is to help companies win with data, and a big part of that is data analytics and data management. And we've been working with Snowflake over the last couple of years. We have 30+ Snowflake trained consultants and a dozen or so shared clients with Snowflake, and it's been a great relationship for us at Cervelo and has added a lot of value to our customers.
All right, thanks so much, Chris. So before we get into our presentation, just a quick overview of our agenda. This is going to be largely Q&A oriented. So I'm going to be asking you, Chris, a number of questions. I think that will be top of mind for many of our wonderful retailers who have joined us today. And then we'll get into our Q&A session and some closing remarks. So let's get right into it. So I'd like to start by reading a quote here that you see from our friends at McKinsey. Customer-facing companies must be able to gather and manage the right data, turn it into insights, and translate those insights into effective frontline action. And at Snowflake, this really rings true. We often talk about making it easy to amass all of your data, enable rapid analytics, and quickly make data insights available to all of your users, consumers, and systems that need them. So I just want to reiterate that this is really the foundation for company growth, specifically in retail, of course. So let's get in to our presentation. And undoubtedly, like I just mentioned, reading a lot of these quotes from industry analysts and various reports, it's clear that the retail and consumer brand landscape is changing. And Chris, I'd like to ask you, how so? So how do we meet the rising customer expectations and operate at the speed of the market?
Yeah, sure. I should probably start by saying, I neglected to say in my introduction, but I've been working in the consulting and data analytics space for the last 20 years, and the vast majority of that has been spent in the retail and consumer goods space. Everything from grocery store chains to fashion retailers to mass market retailers like Walmart and large CPG companies as well in there. So what I've seen, or what we're seeing in the market, is really, I've tried to boil it. I mean, there's a lot of trends happening in the market. I've tried to boil it up into what I see as sort of the three main areas. The first one is the continued digitization of path to purchase. There's been an explosion of data happening in the retail CPG market, this data being generated from our always-on connected mobile and IoT devices. The data can create a field day for marketers, but also elevates the expectations of consumers because they're expecting more customization and personalization with that. In some categories with the Internet of Things, like laundry care or dish care, products are starting to become services. This is even happening, I think, in fashion retailers where, Trunk.com and others are shipping, entire boxes of outfits to consumers, and that is sort of shifting the model from traditional products to almost a service. And then retail is obviously deeply embedded in our mobile and social media platforms, and this has created a lower barrier of entry to digital-born competitors. The second one is, sort of shifts in the model, the retail CPG model itself. Obviously, e-commerce is continuing to gain market share, and the e-commerce giants like Amazon and Alibaba and Tmall are increasing their share of wallet, and they're also starting to push more and more private label where they have more control over profit margins. We also continue to see the success of discount chains, and that's continuing to strengthen. And those two factors create a squeeze within the retail and CPG space that's forcing them to look at everything from assortment to price, promotion, and merchandise selection. And then, we see sort of a convergence between CPG and retail, and the lines between the two are starting to blur. You look at Amazon acquiring Whole Foods and getting into the brick and mortar space, Walmart, acquiring Bonobos, which is a fashion, direct-to-consumer retail, and that will continue to happen, and that's creating, again, more strain on the market in terms of the traditional model for retail and CPG globally. And the last one, really maybe one of my favorite ones, is the millennial effect. And this is a generation that tends to learn more from each other as opposed to corporate brand marketing that's pushed from the center. They also prefer newer, more innovative brands over mass-marketed, mass-channel brands. They are more open with their information and their profile, but with that openness, they expect higher levels of personalization and customization for the products and services that they purchase. And then finally, they're more focused on health, wellness, and corporate responsibility from the companies they purchase from, and that's having an impact on what's driving brand loyalty. So we're seeing many retail and CPG companies think about their corporate values and how they communicate those values out to the millennials.
All right, thanks so much. So let's get right into the data and the role of data and data management, data analytics, and how it really is affecting today's retail and CPG landscape.
Sure. I mean, what I continue to see is data is king. It's even more important now than it ever has been because of some of those macro changes that I mentioned on the prior slide. For example, just understanding where you're winning or losing market share and where your consumers are coming from, and that information is difficult for companies to get a handle on with the multi-channel that customers are finding their brand and looking for their brand now, and traditional ways of looking at information for things like syndicated data providers like Nielsen or IRI or RSI, where they have a good handle on traditional media and brick and mortar. They don't have those same hooks into the online world and the multi-channel world to understand how to give companies like yours a read on what's happening in the market. This, I think, leads to companies in the space leveraging more and more outside data, so data that's outside of their organization. They're sharing data across, between their partners. They're sharing point-of-sale data and inventory data. They're gathering data around social media and social channels. They're gathering data around demographics. There's lots of companies popping up every day that are offering new services around scraping information from the web and selling that data to retail and CPG buyers so that they can understand more about their consumers and their customers. So there's just a whole host of more third-party data providers, and the need to get that data into the organization quickly and joined up with other internal data sets like supply chain or like revenue or marketing spend or other things is a big data challenge. And then, as I mentioned, personalization and customization to the consumer requires very rich data sets. You need to understand what who your consumers are, what they like, what they dislike, where they spend their time, so that you can best offer products to them. And then we're seeing, competing and partnering, co-opetition, if you will, between retail and consumer brands, and that requires the data to be shared easily across borders, just actually something Snowflake is very good at and focused on. And then finally, because of all this, companies need to adopt a modern data architecture that was sort of forged by a lot of the digital native companies like Facebook and Google and Netflix, who didn't, look at legacy database technologies like Oracle or SAP or IBM. They basically created a whole new infrastructure of data architecture, and that modern data architecture is what today's companies need to quickly adopt to be able to meet the rising data needs.
Yeah, and at Snowflake, again, we talk a lot about finding trends from data quickly, and this is so important for retailers. And we like to say that it really starts with having your data in a single location. And with all your data in a single location, you don't have to struggle with integration and interoperability issues that normally kind of slow you down. So everything that you've kind of outlined can sound kind of daunting in terms of how to solve some of these issues, but this is exactly what we address here. So let's talk about some specific use cases here, and I would love for you to kind of get into sharing where you see the convergence of CPG and retail and data analytics and how that impacts our retail customers.
Sure. So one of my clients where I've been spending a lot of time over the last 6 to 8 months on a project is a large CPG company that has about 100 global brands. About 20 of those are power brands that everybody here would know. I'd rather not mention just for the purposes of this call, but a $13 billion annual revenue, large CPG company, and what they are seeing is that one of their largest channels of growth is online, and they sell online through actually multiple channels. They have obviously pure play marketplaces like Amazon. They have third-party sellers where they're selling to a distributor, and that distributor is reselling on various online channels. They have the bricks and clicks, so they sell their products on places like Target.com and Walmart.com and CVS.com and Walgreens.com, et cetera. And then they have their own direct-to-consumer websites, that they're selling to their brands, and each of those different channels has different ways to track sales and track traffic and track conversion rate, track average order value, et cetera. And so the challenge was to pull all that information together into one place and allow them to look at their point of sale data and conversion data, click-through data, alongside digital shelf management KPIs like share of search and availability percent and ratings and reviews and content compliance and integrity, so that they can see what's actually driving the needle on performance for all of these different online channels. If you fast forward to the next slide, the approach, just as you mentioned, is getting the data in one place. So we're actually gathering data from 105 different retail sites, retail platforms globally. That translates to about 135 plus data sets that are processed on a weekly basis. Thousands of files over the course of the last 6 to 8 months that we've been doing this. But the real value is that number one, which is one harmonized data model, which allows them to sort of get all of these different data sets into one view, and then from there you can build, global or local dashboards to, satisfy the needs of somebody who's playing, a role, either, a functional role or a global role, a marketing role, a sales role, et cetera. But really the value is in getting that data quickly aligned and stored in one place and then processing that, to allow the users to onboard and interact with data very quickly. And that's something that Snowflake is able to help with.
No, that's great, and this leads to our next area. And, we have a lot of omni-channel retailers that, like you mentioned earlier, need to manage things like clickstream data, email data, and lots of times all of those data sources are inaccessible. And smart retailers can really better manage targeted marketing, promotion. This needs to really all be based on critical insights from customer data, customer preferences, and this all leads to kind of merchandising and planning. Why did specific products sell better than others? And ultimately making better purchasing decisions. So at the heart of this, let's talk about data warehousing. And is this still relevant to today's retail and consumer brand environment? And let's talk about why that is.
Sure. It definitely is still relevant for all the reasons that you mentioned. It's really about, connected data. I mean, anybody that's in either the CPG space where they're trying to sell their brands across not only brick and mortar but all of the other online channels that I mentioned, or if you're, a retailer and you're trying to sell, either in your brick and mortar environments or direct to consumer via your direct to consumer websites. As you mentioned, there's lots of different tools, operational tools where people can collect data and maybe solve one problem, like how do I optimize my AdWords on Google. But when you want to start to look at the impact of those types of drivers and metrics on other things like sales or or market share or price analytics, you need to connect that data together. You need to have it in one place, which is where the data warehouse comes in. So all this explosion of data from mobile devices, from Internet of Things, and your internal data and your third-party data needs to be brought together so that you can really see the impact and start to look at that, the connection between drivers and outcomes. And then all of that needs to be organized and combined and then matched up with your master data and your hierarchies, and then be available in a near raw format to data scientists. So we've also seen one of the trends I didn't mention on the slide is there's a lot of companies trying to do artificial intelligence and machine learning and hiring lots of data scientists out of school to work with this data because we have more data. But to do that, you need to be able to have that data in a place where the data scientists or the citizen data scientists can access that data, very, very quickly and, like I said, almost in a raw format. But then you have your traditional users, your sales and marketing and finance and executives who, they want to look at reports and dashboards and have more guided analysis. And so that's where, the data warehouse is still important. But because we're not just talking about, my ERP system or my supply chain system, we're talking about all this other third-party data and external data. The old traditional data warehousing approaches are too slow and expensive. And so that's where I think a modern data architecture and a modern approach is required, because the old approach takes too long. I think anybody on the phone who's maybe been part of a data warehousing team knows that it takes a long time to add new things to the data warehouse, to get consensus. It's less flexible and less able to adapt to changes. Requires a pretty robust change management process, and is fairly costly to maintain and operate.
Mm-hmm. So we've covered a lot of ground here, and what I want to talk about is, instead of looking at data analytics as really a daunting initiative, let's talk about just getting started and what is the best way to get started? What is the Cervelo approach here?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about the generic Cervelo approach, and then I'll tell you about some more specific things that we're doing with Snowflake. So generically, the approach that we like to use at Cervelo is sort of a test and learn approach, almost like a lab approach, right? So it starts with generating ideas and working with your internal and external stakeholders and constituents to generate those ideas and do some co-creation of those ideas. And then obviously you select from those ideas based on what's going to generate what has the capability to generate the most business value, what is the required investment to do a proof of concept for that case, and then how complex is it? How quickly could you actually deliver value for that use case? Because what you want to do is in today's world, waterfall doesn't work anymore, right? We want to do stuff in agile, innovative manners where you have an MVP or a project that's going to take weeks rather than months. And so to do that, you want to pick something that's going to generate value, be moderate on the complexity scale, and have something that's not a huge risk in terms of an investment. Then you develop that, and then you release to, you select a subset to release to, whether that's, a handful of markets or a handful of brands, or you focus on a handful of stores. You want some sort of test case where you can release that and get some feedback and see how it goes. And then from there you have, the 3 Ps. You can either pivot, which means maybe you change the focus, or you change something about the use case, you try something else, or you persevere, so you adapt and you build on whatever it was that you started with for your idea, and you maybe add more stores or more brands or more markets. And then, or you can pan the idea altogether and say, okay, we tried it, we did a minimum viable product, and the results didn't deliver what we anticipated, and so we're going to shelve that project and start again. So that's a generic approach that we like to use at Cervelo in terms of helping our clients make an investment, but do it in a way that they can get quickly demonstrate value to the business and build momentum and get additional funding from there. And then, I think in terms of what that means for Cervelo and Snowflake, we have a few different things that we do. We can do training, so we can provide training in 2 days, which is helping your folks get organized around Snowflake and understand analyzing, reporting, data management, security. We can do a planning session where we come in and help do a use case inventory and understand what the integration would look like with your existing tools and technologies, come up with a high-level architecture design, and build out a roadmap. And then finally, we can do a use case, an action, an MVP, and usually we do that in like a 2 to 4 week session where we basically take some of your data, take Snowflake, and build out a pilot or a proof of concept that we can try to demonstrate the value that you can then build on. So those are some ways that we recommend to get started.
Mm-hmm. And I think that sounds very helpful and something that probably sorts things out a bit easier for our retailers here. So let's think about the future, and what do you see happening over the next couple of years for retailers specifically?
Okay. Yeah, I just posted this sort of tongue-in-cheek photo from Wally, because I see these advertisements or these CNET on my Twitter feed about the store of the future with people driving through cars through the store for Amazon, and I just think that maybe we're heading down this road, or we're never going to have to leave our chair. But then on the same side, as I mentioned with the millennials, we have a generation of folks that are more active, more health conscious, more environmentally conscious. So maybe this won't happen. But I think certainly what will happen is we're going to continue to see a heavy reliance on data to drive sales and to drive profit improvement. And I think that's going to happen, not only in the analytics space, but also in the planning and merchandise planning, supply chain planning, financial planning space, S&OP planning. So companies are moving more and more towards, data-driven and artificial intelligence-driven, planning processes in addition to the analytics that they're doing. And I think we'll continue to see, a convergence and blur the lines between retail and CPG. I think we're just getting started with the Walmart and Bonobos and Amazon and Whole Foods. I think we're going to continue to see a service model or a subscription model become more prevalent in a lot of different retail cases. And so all of those things I think are going to both create data and demand data to help companies win and succeed.
So in closing, I just wanted to share a couple of bullet points, some food for thought here. And I'll say that retailers really need to continue to better understand and continue to target their customers. I think anyone would agree with that. Clearly, this isn't a choice. And with modern day solutions, there are lots of opportunities. And Chris, I'll ask you to chime in here too, but the opportunity really comes in the form of reducing costs, time, improving revenue, and providing a better customer experience really all the way around. If you were to share just some closing remarks here before we let folks get back to their day, what else would you sort of add in terms of what you want folks to leave with?
Well, I mean, if anybody here is, I guess, evaluating Snowflake, that to me means that, either they're already using a modern data architecture, like a Redshift or AWS or Azure, and they're trying to figure out maybe how to do things, better, faster, cheaper, or they're doing things in the sort of the legacy traditional data warehousing. Maybe they're using Teradata or Oracle or something else, and they're trying to learn. And I would say you definitely need to look at this technology and how it might be able to help. We've got a lot of great use cases, and I think companies need to adapt modern data architecture and data management practices in order to keep up with this explosion of data, but also satisfy the growing number of data-savvy business users and data scientists and citizen data scientists. So if there's more, a deeper understanding that people are looking for and they want to have a follow-up conversation, please reach out to Melanie or myself, or look at our website, because I think we can arrange a deeper discussion on and dialogue about modern data architecture and how Snowflake can help.
Great. So I think we have time for one question here. I'll go ahead and take this. There's a question here about why is Snowflake better than my on-premise data warehousing solution that we're already using? And one thing that we discuss here, and this is specifically important for retailers, is peak times, peak seasons, and known variations in your workloads here. So when you're bound to an on-prem solution, you really can't automatically scale up and out to address, either unanticipated or known seasonal variations, say, during the holiday season. And I know a lot of you retailers are prepping for the holiday season right now. So now is sort of timely to talk about this. And with Snowflake, you can spin up or spin down depending on your needs. And because we separate compute and storage, really the beauty is this multi-cluster shared data architecture, and that gives you the ability to access unlimited amounts of compute to serve all your data and all your users. So we like to talk about instant elasticity, and the compute function is now available in seconds, and we also bill by the second, so there's no waiting. And you can pay for exactly what you use, which is really groundbreaking. So a little teaser, but we would love for you to check out Snowflake and get started. You can get started for free. We do have a trial on our website. So go ahead and get signed up at snowflake.net. And I'll leave you with our contact information. So we are at the bottom of the hour. This is a 30-minute presentation, and we do these monthly, so we'd love to see you next time around. We hope this was great. I'd like to thank Chris Boulanger from Cervelo. And I want to wish you all a great day, and thank you for joining us. I'm Melanie, and have a great afternoon. Let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.